check the settings on that. Should be right. Yep. Okay. All right. So this folder that I've gone into, this is the Synergetic folder, and it usually sits on the C drive, but that can sit anywhere on the server that you want it to. So basically, what's included in this folder before we get into setting up permissions and so forth. I'll just give you a run through what's included in the folder. So the main, and you guys would have, whoever set up the shortcuts and everything would have seen this when you went through. This would have been the folder that was you, was it, Rod? Yeah. So this would have been the folder that they pointed you to in regards to setting up the where the shortcuts and the exe file and everything was. So the syn main. So that's the main folder, the main application there. Sorry, so that's the main application there, syn main. Okay, and what they've actually done here is you've got two CFG files. So we got more than two CFG files, but the two main ones that we have are you've got the Synergy Play, and then you've got there should be another one there, the Synergy Verification. So if I was to open those up, I'll just open them up with Notepad. Okay. So the information that's in here, and this is usually just a set and forget most of the time. Your authentication method, so that's where that's controlled in here in this configuration file. So you'll see at the moment the authentication method. So there's a few different choices that you've got. The one that it's set to at the moment is SQL. Okay, so we've got it set to SQL because we haven't set up any Windows users or anything at the moment. So we just run our trial purely on SQL. And then depending on how you're going to go or the decision you go with going forward as far as, are you going to use Windows authentication? Then you can change that around that. If you're using Windows authentication, it doesn't require a password, or is it just going to, once the staff log in to their computer in the morning, is it going to recognise their AD password? Yeah, cool. So then all they have to do is basically click on OK, and it'll take them into Synergetic. Okay. The other thing that it shows here is what database name that the configuration setting is pointing to. So you'll see in this case here you've got there's a Synergetic AU New South Wales Cal Rossi test. So it's the test database at the moment. Yep. Okay. So going forward, that'll be the production database. Okay. I can't get rid of this. Just keep on ignoring it. Yeah, and things such as what message you want to show up on the screen when you first log in. So when you first log into Synergetic. So if I was to go into, I'll go into verification for now. So if I went into the verification shortcut, okay, so that there is what would be on the, actually I'll open up verification one. Is basically that message there. Yep. Okay. And so you can change that at any time too. Okay. And that blue color there, because we've got that blue background on the verification instance, that's that blue color that's controlling that CL blue there, as opposed to the that there, which is controlling the play version. Yep. Okay. So if I open up play, shortcut play, you'll see that message there is that one there, saying Synergetic Play. Okay. The other thing with verification, you'll see verification is actually that's the verification configuration file. That is that's pointing to production. Yeah, yeah. So that's pointing to production. So they, as far as the staff go, they won't be able to make any changes to that because it'll be read only for them. So they can go in and check the data using that instance. But for you guys, you'll be able to log in as the system admin, so that with the SA password, go into there, and that's where you can start setting up any accounts and so forth, so user accounts. And what we can do there is get them carried across from verification. They'll go across to live when the live data goes across. Okay. So I'll just close those two down. Now cancel that one. So our shortcuts here, if I was to go into the properties for the shortcut, okay, you'll see that the target here, so there's your target there. So obviously it's coming from this folder, this CAS SMS APP Synergetic $. Then there's the SynMain exe. So that's but then we've got the configuration file, which is the one that's controlling where it's pointing to. So that's the Synergy Play, which is so our Synergetic Play icon is pointing to that test. Yep.
I've just copied the basics around that.
Yep. Yeah. Yep. Exactly. Yep. And then vice versa with this one. If I go into properties here, you'll see that that's Synergy verification. So that's what's controlling the two there. Okay. Now the other things in these folders to look out for, besides those, is really our in reports. In the reports folder, this will be any Crystal reports. So the actual templates of the Crystal reports will be in there. So that's where they're actually dragging the reports from. Okay. And then if there's going forward, if there's any site reports, so if you have any customized reports, Crystal reports, then there'll be a site folder within the reports folder, and they'll be kept separately in there. Okay. So at any time, if you need to edit an existing Crystal report or one that you've already customized, then that's where you would actually access it through here. Yeah. Okay. And also icons. So things like icons. If you had any customized icons going forward, so ones out of the ordinary, like because I think there's 7 or 8 standard icons, which are the ones for the medical and for separated families, for things like your legal, etc. They're the standard icons, and then there's an extra 5 that you can use, or you can create and use within the system too. So those icons themselves, which will be an image, will sit in this particular folder under the icons system. Sorry, icons folder. Okay. Okay, now SQL Manager or management, which I'll be able to get into. I'll get into that via our Scoring Connect. It's that one there, isn't it? So this is how we access our clients' Synergetic servers through remote access, through this remote access tool. as you can see, that's the same folder there. It might be on one of the other ones. Try that one. Actually, it's probably that one. Cares New South Wales database. What's the difference between those two? Okay, so to get into the SQL server, you need to use the system admin password. Have you guys been provided with those passwords yet? Yep, excellent. Okay. One password for SA. So you got the you got the sysadmin one, and then the SA one. Yeah. Synadmin, sorry, yeah, Synadmin one, and then you've got the SA one. Yep. So this is the SA one's used to get into the SQL server itself. Yep. Okay. So within this, we've got there's our databases there. Okay. There's our trial database there. So if I was to go into security here and into users, okay. So what we've got in roles, okay. I see what they've done. So the overall securities, they've set in here, I'd say. No, not in there. I'm looking for those train. I'm just looking for the train. The train passwords are usually kept in here too. Security users, yeah. CAS New South Wales trial. That'd be webmaze, wouldn't it? The WM. I'd say Moodle. Database roles. Security users. There's the SA one, so that's the system admin password. Sorry, the system admin user account. Which should basically have access to everything. Production. We shall see whether. That's the right one. So what I'm looking for here is the actual trend, the passwords that we used yesterday. Sorry, the usernames we used yesterday, which was the train, fin. Well, we used train yesterday, train and help me. So what usually happens is they're set in, so that has an account in SQL, in the SQL server, and that gets replicated in Synergetic itself. So it knows that it's got access to the server, but I can't likely find Synergy 1. That used to be the old one. Let's try again. Logins. There's the SA. Databases, CAS New South Wales trial, CAS pre-trial. So that's one there. Security. Users. No, not in that one. Wouldn't expect it to be in the CAS pre-trial. Pre-live, yes. That's the schemas. And then you've got production. Here we go. Thought they've got to be in there somewhere. So they're actually under production, and then with that production, they've been able to use. You're able to use them with the for the play too. Okay, because that's so with our under here under the Cal Rossi production here. What we've got is our users that have been set up, and the main ones we look at here is our train fin, and train pay. So they're the ones that we're using for the trial. Okay, so the train pay, because you're not doing payroll through Synergetic, then that's irrelevant. So it'll be train and trade fin. So for those guys that are going to be doing the finance training on Thursday and Friday, they'll use the train fin login. Okay, because that's been provided with additional, and I'll show you where that sits in Synergetic. So that's been provided with additional permissions to allow that user to get into the finance database. Okay, whereas the one we used yesterday, which was train, that was purely for non-finance, so we didn't see any of the finance stuff at all. Okay. So these are just been, the way these have been set up is basically because they're SQL accounts. They've basically been set up here. We've got our Okay, password. No, this is required. Okay. So it's pretty much the password that's been set up and to say that it's got access to this server. Okay. Okay, so got access to that server there. SQL authentication and so forth. Okay, but going forward, what will happen going forward with your staff logins? The way you can set it up is in security. You'll have users, and you'll have a whatever your AD group's called in your Active Directory. Okay, as long as you all you need to do is basically set up a new user in Synergetic and say if it's non-finance users, okay? Or it can be whatever. There's two ways you can do it. You could either move all your, you could set up a new AD group, okay, purely for Synergetic and call that Syn non-finance or Syn finance, whatever you want to call it, okay? And then the AD accounts of those individual users that need to go into those groups, you just put those into those two groups, those two AD groups. Then when in SQL Studio, what you do here is you basically just replicate that group. So you would go in, for instance, like if we tried one now and said, okay, we're going to add a user, okay, but a user being a group itself, because we don't want to have to bring in, you don't want to have to bring in every single, okay.
So you'd have separate groups.
So you'd have separate groups, yeah.
For every health.
Do they all need separate, or they just be non-finance?
Well, they could be just non-finance, because then what then controls what they see is the security within Synergetic itself. Okay, you could even have one. You could have one big group, okay, with both non-finance and finance users, but because the users still need to have, because you can then break those users into groups within Synergetic itself.
So
Yeah.
I could just put them into the Synergetic group, and then you sort them out once they
Yeah, because they won't see anything unless they've got, unless they've got SQL experience and they've got access to Management Studio, and, to be able to get into it, the back end, that's the only way they can get into it.
So does Alec have to enter the names into Synergetic as well?
Yep. So in Synergetic, you still need to create single accounts in Synergetic, because it'll be your Cal Rossi / and then a new. So whatever your AD login is, you have to replicate that in Synergetic itself. But then that maps to what allows you to have that access or be able to access Synergetic is because it's mapped to that AD group, and it's saying, yep, Alex has got access through this username, and that's the easy part. It takes no time to do that. So all they need to be is they just need to be a staff member. They need to have the constituency of staff in Synergetic, which looks like most, what we saw yesterday, the staff members have come across with that constituency. They might have two records, some of them, but as long as it's mapped to that staff record, they'll have that account. Yep. Okay. And then you can control who sees what within Synergetic itself. So what permissions they've got, which we'll go into that in more detail. Then on the MS query side, so having access to tables and views, that's another level of security there too. So the SQL server objects, they then have to be provided with access to those, both in Synergetic, and that controls what access they've got, but also in the SQL server. So although they might have access to certain information in Synergetic itself, so a finance person may have access to Synergetic itself. So as far as viewing the the information in the database, they would still need to have that additional information to be able to access the views to run a query. Okay, so basically what you're doing there is you're saying, well, not anyone's going to be able to run, even if if they've got access to MS Query, they're not going to see views that they shouldn't be seeing. So a non-finance person won't be able to run it, go in the back end and run a query to access finance information. Okay.
So it's fairly granular. Do you have to set that granularity up for every single user, or is it?
No, you don't. No, you set that up to groups, and then you choose which groups you want to put that a person into, and a staff member can be in more than one group, and if they're in more than one group, it's not a case of overriding one group the other. It's an addition. Yeah. So say if Alex had she had X permissions, and then she needed a extra permission, an additional permission, then you could set her up in a separate group, and that would then add on to what she's already got. But those people in that original group would only have what they had access to start off with. Yeah.
So I'm assuming that models off what we're already doing with Maze.
Model, but because Maze is pretty useless at being able to define and roles, isn't it? Like it's a nightmare. Like people can see too much.
Yeah.
No, it'll be done at exec level.
Yeah.
You can see what.
Go try it.
Yeah.
Because that was one
Yeah.
of the that's one of the dramas.
And you can control it to the to tab level too. So within an actual program. So if you're in student maintenance and you don't want someone to see the debtors tab, well, if they're non-finance, it'll just come up. You don't have access anyway. Yeah. But say if it was the pastoral care tab, you didn't want them to see that, then they just wouldn't have access to that. Yeah. Yeah. So that would be your first. That would be your first step, to set up those groups in. First of all, decide whether you're just going to set up the one group in Active Directory and then replicate that in the SQL server. That's right, yeah. And as soon as you take someone out of, as soon as you take someone out of that AD group, their access is going to, yeah. So you don't have to worry about taking them, then deleting their account straight away and getting them out of the groups within.
So they don't need any file rights or anything within that group. Just as long as they remember that group.
Just as long as they remember that group, yep. And then they're Yep.
So what happens if you have someone leave?
Yep. Yep.
2 months later they come back, but they're in a completely different role than what they. As you've been adding back into AD, does it pick up?
It would pick up what they're originally in. So you would just have to move them to. You'd have to move them in Synergetic, in the Synergetic group. Yeah.
Adjust them to.
Yeah.
Could that potentially
happens a bit, does it?
Like, leave, and 2 months later they come back. Oh, wow, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So you just have to, if it was a different role, just move them around in Synergetic itself. Yeah. Yeah. There's another way you can do it within, which still means you have to set up. You still got to set up their accounts and everything, but there's to what extent are you going to use HR? Because I know payroll's not being used, is it?
We were looking at using.
You were looking at, okay, because with HR you've got the option to in Synergetic itself to map specific groups. So the groups that you create, map them to roles, so to job roles. So the person that's in that job role then gets those permissions. The only thing with that is, though, if there's extra permissions that someone needs, because there's a crossover, and we know there's always crossovers with most of our clients anyway, then it just makes it a bit difficult. Then I usually recommend that you do it the other way. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't think we're going to start with We probably should.
Yeah, so basically what you would do here is in the users, you'd have that group of users. So a group of users would be a user in this case, okay? And then you'd have that whole group would come across, okay? But in Synergetic itself, just open up. Okay. So I'm going to log in as SA. I love these passwords that they give us for these, they're never easy. It's the first thing I do, take a photo of the screen. Yeah, what do you do? Well, you say I can't send them on email or anything. And they're kept in our support tool, but we can't always get access to our support tool offline. Okay, so so this is our so this is our verification or validation version of Synergetic. So anything that we changed yesterday won't have been changed in here. This is still pointing to production, so whereas the other one's pointing to test. Okay. So as you can see, as SA, you've pretty much got access to everything. Yep. So if I went up into system here, you've got this. Whoops. What is that? If I go up in the system here, you've got this group user security maintenance. Okay. And within here, you've got on your left-hand side, you've got the groups that are currently that have currently been created. Okay. These groups here with the Z next to them, the prefix, these are basically these are like templated groups that our converters include in the basically when they set the database up, they include those with the database. So just in case you can use them as a starting point. Some of them are depending on what your roles and everything are too. But they've sort of, as you can see, there's absences, attendances, basic events, development. So it's sort of they've kept it in line with what modules are available. Okay. So, and as I said, you can either ignore them or you can use them as a starting point, and then you could just copy one of those groups. So you see how it comes down to, and then you got Z2, okay, which is absence and attendance all in one. Then you've got your finance ones down the bottom, finance full access, debtor full access, and you've got MS query groups, etc. So any ones that you don't use at the end, you could just delete the group. Yeah. At the moment, so that's groups itself. If I was to click on users, these are the only users that have been set up. Okay. Now these here, these are for our they're for the databases themselves, so we ignore those ones. But what we've got here is we've got our SA, our train, and our train fin are the ones that we'll be using over the next few days. Okay. So you'll see here when I click on SA, the group that SA's belongs to is the Synergetic super user. So that means access to everything. Okay. And with that, it doesn't. You'll notice that if I go into that group, Syn super user, there's nothing actually. There's nothing that's been allocated as such. It's just taken for granted that if they're SA, you don't need to, or it's in super, sorry, you don't need to go through and tick the.
That one's even got pastoral care in it.
That's even got pastoral care in it, yeah. So you wouldn't. The only people that would have SA would be probably have access to SA would be yourselves. Yeah, no one else. You wouldn't put anyone else in that group. Yeah, and then you'd have, if it's pastoral care that needs to be seen by the executive team, they'd have their own group. Yeah. So basically, this is just used by, would be the IT team, and also we use that back in Melbourne. Yeah, so that's there. So that. So if I looked for, there's our Syn Super user group there. So you'll see here, there's nothing that's actually been selected because it's just, like I said, it's just taken for granted that that's what they have. Okay. As opposed to, and I could check to see. So I could check to see what users were in that group. So the other way around. So to find out what users are in this group, the only one in there is SA. Okay. As opposed to our train, so the one we've been using, they're in the no development group. Okay. And what's been set up there. So if I went into groups, there's a no development here. Okay, so you'll see within the no development group within verification or validation should be just all select, which is read only. Yeah. So you'll see here, if I change this up the top here to authorized records, okay, that'll give me all the records that they've got access to, okay, which are all these, but it's read only because we don't want them to change anything there. Okay. If I went into now with the entities, this is where it separates the finance from the non-finance, and then because you've got that extra database too, finance database, that's also in there. Okay. So with the main finance database, if I click in there, okay, it's just saying straight away it doesn't have access to the finance database. Okay, so they've got no rights at all to that one. Okay, if I went back to the main database there, okay, and then if I went into non-authorized records, so these are all the non-authorized records that, or the records that they haven't got any access to. So Train hasn't got any access to these at all. Okay. Now with our groups that are, if I went back to our templated groups, for instance, so say if I went into, let's have a look. Yeah, okay. So say if I went into this one's called school nurse, but it could be called health centre or whatever, okay? So within that group, you would then add, at the moment there won't be any users in there, or there's install in there, but in this group, you would add your staff that would need access to this particular information. Okay, so you'd set up your group first and say, okay, well, these are the staff members that need access to that. Yep.
So staff members can be in multiple groups?
They can, yep, and and what it'll do is just build on what they've got. Yep. So in this case here, this case here with the school, if I go back to school nurse, you'll see I've gone up to authorised records here, okay, and programs is the default because we're talking about programs at the moment. So you'll see that there's certain items that that the school nurse has got access as select only, so read only, and then there's others, things like your emergency details that they've got, they can update, they can insert, they can delete also, so they've got full access to those, okay, as part of their role. Now the way this works, as far as programs go, what this is here is you've got your module, okay, so level 1's your module, which if I clicked on module here, you'll see that there's a future students module, so that's this module here, okay, so that's this module here, okay. Resource 1, so that's your module, and then resource 1, so that permission there is basically just that they can see that, they can actually view that there, okay. This one here, if they, that's right, they wouldn't be able to get into it, yeah, so if they couldn't view that, they wouldn't actually be able to get into, yeah, into that, into future students at all. The next one is that futures and this here, so that's the actual program itself, future student maintenance, okay, so that's what this one here is, okay. Now if I clicked into future student maintenance, and this works the same for all programs, you got the first level, which is your you got your module level, which is the icon, then you got your program level, resource 1, and then it builds down to the different tabs. So in this case, if I clicked on OK, and I'll just go back up into, now to get back to another program, I'll just go into Window, and I can get back into group security there. So this here, where you've got a resource 1, resource 2, basically what this is, this comment, or say these contacts, which are in the same level, so let's say contacts, if I go back up into future students, the contacts tab, which is this, that's basically that there, okay? So if they didn't have a ticket for at least read, they wouldn't see that. Okay, so that's where you can bring it down to that level, okay? The emergencies here, you'll see if I go back into futures, and I find emergency. So the emergency is the resource 2, but you'll notice there's actually, you've got emergency 1, 2, and emergency 3. So the sub-tabs are basically resource 3. So it goes down to resource 3, okay? So you'll see in that case here for school nurse, they've got access to select, update, insert, and delete. Now, you're not expected to go along and have to tick each one individually or anything like that. What you can do is, for instance, if you said, so if I went up and said, okay, so if I went into student medical details, okay, that's actually under student now, I think. Yep. So under student, if I then typed in, and you can use a keyword too, so if I typed in medical here, okay, and so that's all the student medical details. I wanted to give those, so if I wanted to give those actual permissions to the school nurse group, I would click on the school nurse group first before I do this search. So I've changed to module student and then just look for the keyword medical. And then I can just click on the top line there and then right click. And then I could say select all, and then right click again. And if it was all rights to it, so select, delete, insert, select, update, insert, and delete, I just click on that. And now that's actually gone to authorised records, okay? Then if there was a couple that you had to change, you could then go in and change them individually if you had to, okay? Yeah, so you can either search by module. So if I went into attendances there, you'd expect that there's going to be, okay, so in this case, you wouldn't expect school nurse isn't going to be included in the attendance marking, but on the medical side, maybe in the, if they're using it for the sick bay or health centre, then they would have those particular. Yeah, that's right. So they'd have read access to that. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so another one of our default groups there, or our templated groups, is we've got teachers there, okay? So what I would do here, because I've still got attendance up there, I'm just going to say not selected there. Okay, non-authorised records, go into authorised. So it looks like that hasn't actually been set up as yet, okay, for the teacher access for that one. So then you could work out, okay, what are we going to give teachers, and then you could add those to that. With that school nurse one, if you thought, yep, that's the one we want to use, we're going to use this one, you could then right click on the school nurse group, and rather than rename it, you could copy that Okay, and then you could call that whatever you want. Okay, so what our clients usually do is just the prefix they'll put in, something like, so in your case you might put something in like Cal Medical, and then you might change that to Medical Centre. Okay, and that'll copy across the group with the actual permissions that are in that group. Okay. Now there's a full rights group, so that's basically with the full rights group. You'll see for here it's read only because we're in the. So this is separate from the Syn Super group where we've got access to everything, but the full rights group. So that might be one that there might be someone else that's within the organisation that has full rights. Okay, which is similar to SA, but you could then go and change, if you wanted to change some of those permissions within that group, you could. Yeah. Okay. So I think in what we've got set up at the moment in, train, so train pay, for our clients that, so basically what full rights includes is the payroll too, for the clients that use payroll. So we have them in, they use train pay is in that one. Sorry? Yeah. Okay. Now the other things that are set up here, excuse me, the other permissions that are set up here under resources, the main ones are you've got your reports, CDA. So basically what these are those crystal reports. So what crystal reports are certain people or certain groups going to have access to. Okay. Because we've logged in as SA, you'll see that these SSRS reports come up. At the moment, they're not relevant. Okay, but there's a way that you can you can filter them out anyway when you're providing reports to someone anyway. Okay, so I could basically for this full rights here, I could say give me anything with SSRS just to filter out all the other ones because full rights has got access to all reports. Okay, as soon as I started typing that in. So there's all my SSRS ones. So I could go select all and then no rights. Okay. So they're all gone. New Zealand, wouldn't need New Zealand reports. Same again. No rights. And so on. So you can use Control and Shift, just as you would normally use it to select multiple entries. Okay. So so with the reports, you'll see that there's only a select permission. That's it, because they can't do anything more to them. All they can do is select them and read the reports. Unless it's someone who's got Crystal Report software, to be able to edit them themselves. But I can't imagine that's there's going to be too many people who have that anyway, besides yourselves. So with the reports, just works the same as far as the permissions go. You'll have your reports that will go to that group. Okay, so it's you're still accessing that group or selecting that group, and it's also giving the reports to that group. Okay, so not only will they have the permissions to the program, so for instance with full rights, not only has full rights got these permissions, these authorized records to the program here, and if I went into finance, you'll see that these are the full rights has got access to these permissions in finance. Okay, so because they were already set up, it's brought them up. Whereas that other one, when I went in with train before, it just said they don't have access to the finance database at all. Okay, so that's where you control it. So even if they were in a group with the finance users in SQL Studio, they're still not going to be able to see them because it's down to that group level. Okay. And if we went into, if I went into the, if I went into play and went into the same security maintenance in play, it'll show us that full rights has got full access here, okay? Because they'll be able to make changes in there, okay? Whereas in here, full rights has still only got read access. It's just the SA that's got full rights to do this, okay? But going forward, once it becomes, you know, live and test, then live, they'll have full rights, will have access to, will be the same access that they'll have in play, basically, at this stage. Okay, so with your, so I've clicked on Medical Centre, and it's just said, group does not have permission to access financial entity. Good, okay, we don't want that. That's fine. So I could go into report CDA and change this. So that's even to the reports side of things too. Okay, it's not going to give me any reports that have got that are finance reports. Okay, whereas if I went in here, you'll see for Medical Centre at this stage there's only been one set up. Okay, but I could go in and say I want to see any other medical. Now, because I've got it as authorised records, it's not going to show us yet. So I can change that to all records or non-authorised records. Okay. And then I could say here, okay, I'm going to give them everything. Okay. So select all and select rights. But then I want to get rid of those SSRS ones. Okay. And select all. No rights. Okay. So that's all our, so now what we've done there is we've given our medical centre access to all the medical reports, okay, that would be applicable to their role. Okay. Report sites, so that's that one. If there is any customised reports that are customised for Calrossi, then they'll sit in that report site folder there. Okay, and then again, whoever needs access to them, you can then provide access to those people. The other ones that we'll look at here are the SQL server object. So basically what this is where this is the views that staff have provided access to for them to be able to run MS Query. Okay. And again, these groups have to actually be, set up separately. As far as there'll be an extra group called a MS Query group within the SQL server too, but you already have those users in there, so it'll read off that, and then depending on what access you're giving, going in the groups themselves. So you think medical, okay, well I'll give them the medical SQL server objects. Okay, so in this case, with the medical centre, we could say create SQL group permissions and change this here to all records. Okay, so we want to give them access to views. So these are all the views with the V next to them. And then we could go, we want medical. Okay, now with the views or the SQL objects, they can only be select anyway. So although they come up select, update, insert, delete, they can only view them, they can't edit them. So you can just give them select. Even if you gave them everything else, they wouldn't be able to do anything more but view. Okay, but I usually say just give them select anyway. Okay, and apply updates. All right, so they've now basically got access to those once that group was set up or the users in that group are set up in the an SQL server, then they'll have access to those views too to run MS query. Okay. Now, document classification. So this I spoke yesterday about a little bit to the group about document classifications. So basically, these are linked to a lookup table, and I'll just get into our lookup tables here. Okay. And I'll explain what they are, the lookup tables. So basically this LU document classification, this is a lookup table, okay? And this lookup table, this is what users are provided with as selections when they go to, for instance, if they want to classify a document that they're importing into Synergetic. Okay, they've got a choice of what they can see. Okay. But the way these work too, there's an extra level of security here where you've got group security, or you've got all. So these are the security meanings here. You've only got two choices. You've got group or all. Okay. So you'll see that there's a bit of a mixture here. Okay. The ones with group, that means that you're then able to provide a group with access to that particular document classification. Okay, so if I imported a document into DocMan for a certain student, and say if it was something like a medical document that was a confidential medical document, then the only people that would be able to see that document or even see that entry would be people in the group that have got access to view that particular document. Okay, so where we've got here, and this is, so the template here is the templated document classifications. You've got medical private, that's the code, confidential medical documents, and then you've got that set up as group. So what that means, if I go back to the group user security, okay, under document classifications, you'll see that the medical private is set to a group there. So I could say, okay, for medical centre, the medical centre needs to have those rights there, okay? Or I could have gone right click all rights, okay? And also, that's also a group there. So I could have gone that one and said, select update and inset rights, okay? Okay, so anyone who's in the medical centre would be able to read those. They'd be able to insert a document with that classification. They'd be able to update the information behind that, and they'll be able to delete it. Okay, but if I wasn't in that medical centre group, I just wouldn't see it. Okay, and I wouldn't be able to do anything.
People can't see that there's something there.
No, it's just blank. So if I went into a student's, say for instance, if it was a future student, so we've got that open, and I went into their DocMan, okay, this would just be blank. Even though there's something there, that would just be blank. So if I imported, and I'll be able to import because I'm there as I'm in as SA. If I imported as the medical centre person, they would be able to go in here and they'd be able to select either one of these. Okay. But if it was someone else, they wouldn't be able to see it, and they wouldn't be able to insert a document with that.
Is there a way of flagging it so that people know there's something there that they need to check or not?
So if it's someone that they can't see the document but they still need to check it, well, I would do that so if it's something like that, I would, that message that's in there at the moment for medical, put that in the public medical alert and say, for any medical details, please contact the health centre. Yeah, so you could do it that way. So the general Synergetic public would see that message, but they just wouldn't see the document. Yeah.
For all these settings stored within the database?
They're stored within the database itself. Yep. Yep. Okay. Okay, so we'll go back up into. So that's the document classifications. Now, just back to those lookup tables. So yeah, when I went into this here, so that's the lookup table. You'll see that. So these are all active. All these codes and all these descriptions. Okay. Which was basically when I went into DocMan itself. So that's basically that there. So that drop-down menu is reading from that lookup table. Okay, so that's where it's picking that up from. And then depending on who's got access to what is what they'll be able to see there. If I was to right-click on there, it'll bring up the lookup table name. So in this case, it's called LU document classification. So the lookup tables always start with LU. But if you're not sure of the name, just type in, I usually just type in a keyword. Otherwise, if you type in LU, it wants the exact name when you look it up. Okay. Another example that would be under personal, where you've got, so when you drop down here, say for instance, nationality. Okay, so you got your different nationalities there. So there would be a lookup table. If I right click there, lookup table of LU nationality, which in here there's our LU nationality there. Okay, and then we've got our code and our description that matches what was available in there. Okay, the majority of those lookup tables, everything will be available as far as the choices. Okay, it's only those things like document classifications, file types that you might want to put that extra security on, that then controlled by groups and so forth. Okay? But in this case, you'd want someone to be able to choose Australian for the nationality from that list. Although going forward, when you've got online, so when you've got your online forms up and running, basically what the choices that the potential parents are getting, so the applicants are getting, is what is in the lookup table. So they're mapped to those lookup tables. So you can change those lookup tables at whatever you want to add to those lookup tables. There's obviously some that government ones, like things like your religion codes or your country codes and stuff like that, language and things that you would leave, but the others you could change those to what you want the parents to see. Yeah. Okay. That was obviously a test one. This one, was it? Laura Ashley? Isn't that a brand?
Yeah.
Is that a brand, Laura Ashley?
Yeah.
Yeah. Unless it's a coincidence.
It is a coincidence. But
is it? Oh, okay. So that's been unintentionally put in there, the positives.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's an old enrolment date anyway. Yeah. Yeah.
In Maze, you got, when you do search,
Yeah.
often people type, instead of typing in the search field, they
Yeah.
type it in the surname.
In the surname itself.
And that's
Yeah.
where
Yep.
that phone number
Yep.
is saved,
Yep.
same thing, that's how
Yep.
it's done.
And then they've saved that. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right. So that's, so document classifications, that's where that would be set up. So in this case, we'd say The only two groups, and you probably have those under your executive groups and things like that. They would have access. So you could just, with those there, you could then also add them to another group. Yeah. Now with our constituencies, so what happens with the constituencies, you can, okay, with your constituencies, so that's the groups within Synergetic, okay? And there's another, whoops, touchy this mouse. So there's another lookup table, which is called constituencies. Okay. So these are all our constituencies within Synergetic, okay? So majority of them are system generated. So for instance, with a current parent, soon as a future application is rolled over to a current student, then that parent gets the current parent constituency, and the student gets the current student constituency. Okay. So all those there, you can actually control who sees what. Okay. So if there's certain, say again, if there's certain finance information that you don't want to see, but they won't, if they don't have access to finance, they're not going to see, if they see a constituency that's got as at DEB, so a debtor constituency, that's all they'll see. They won't be able to get into the information if they don't have access to debtor. Okay, but the way some schools use it is that they don't, because you can give anyone access to the community. Okay, so the community database, which has all records in there, so all constituencies in there. Okay, then as far as if they try to get into another, say for instance, if it was a staff constituency, and then they tried to get into the HR module, they'd need to have access to the HR module. Okay, but they'd still see that staff constituency. So you could restrict it so they don't actually, they can't even get into that record in the community, because in the community it'll have that staff member's address, because they're a community member. Yeah. So if you don't want them to, if they're not say for instance, if they're not a current parent, so there's no need for someone from from admin to go, if they're not related to, if they've got nothing to do with the HR department, then you could say, okay, well, I'm going to restrict the at STF constituency, being the staff one, to certain groups. Okay, so then they just wouldn't come up when they went into the community. They wouldn't come up in the community records unless they had an additional. If they had an additional constituency of, say, current parent, and that person had access to the current parent records, then yes, because they would need access to the current parent records. Does that make sense? So you've got that extra level of security you can put in there too, which is basically works the same as our document classifications. The only difference with it is you would have seen it with the document classifications, it brings up what each of the document classifications are, and then you've got to select which ones. With the constituencies, because there's so many of them, what they've done is they've said only constituencies with a security meaning in group are included in this grid. Okay, so if you went, if I went back to the lookup table, okay, and you'll see that because these are all set to all, so that's why there's nothing coming up in that other one. If I said, okay, for creditors, I'm going to set that to group here. Okay, and I just wanted to see I just wanted the accounts payable people to see it. Okay, and I saved that. Now, if I went back into our group user security and refresh that, we've now got, oh, did I change debtor? Okay, so you've now got the debtor group there. Okay, so then you could say select for certain groups. So if that was select for instance, select for the medical group, for argument's sake. Okay, so it would only be the medical group that would see that particular constituency. Okay, I'll go back up and change that back.
But once again, if they're non-finance,
If they're non-finance, they're not going to be able to get into the.
They're not going to see creditors and debtors in the community, or they still will.
They'll see them in the community as far as they'll see their community record, so they'll see their address and things like that. Because if they're a debtor, they're going to be a current parent, yeah. But they're not going to be able to get any further than that, so they won't be able to go into the debtors module itself and deep dive into that information. All they'll see is the personal information, such as their relations, their address, and things. Just say, put that back so they can see that in. Okay, so yep, so that's now gone. Okay. Now file types, to be honest, I haven't really recommended file types, because with your file types are, well, when I say I haven't recommended file types, I haven't recommended restricting file types, because basically your file types are, if I go into the lookup table for file types, so your academic, your music, your outdoor activities, sports, etc. So again, it's going to be, if they don't have access to, they'll have access to academic records if they need to have student access and etc. and parents access. But if they're not involved in any class setups or anything like that, they're just not going to see them anyway. They'll see the timetable, but they won't see the background of it. And then we've got the other ones that we usually show is we've got action center types. So what the action center types are, they're related to, so this little grey flag up here, okay? So this is where, so there's certain tasks within, or certain processes within Synergetic that can trigger an action center type, okay? So basically things like, if an online application is processed by a parent or an applicant, then that would trigger a action center task that would be fired off to a staff member to say that there's an application that's sitting in the system waiting to be approved. Okay, so that sort of stuff there. So this is where it's actually set up, where you can set it up to say, for these groups, they should be receiving these action center messages. For these groups, they should be receiving these. Okay. And there's certain ones where you've got your, well, grey flags. At the moment, there's no messages in. So everyone would have, every user, when they get their own user accounts, they'll have their own action center, Okay. So they'll just see any messages that are related to them. Okay. And that may be that there's an alert. Okay. So it's saying that there's an actual alert. So it's alerting them to some information. Okay. So for instance, this one here, and they're usually things like reports that, there's a report that's been run for, in this case here, this is a working with children check. So the alert message is a report that lists all active community members, non-staff, who's working with children checks that have expired, those sort of things. Okay. Whereas your green ones are your tasks. So for instance, that portal update. So if there's a portal update made, so the community portal or parent portal, if a parent makes a change to the details on the parent portal, then the tasks created when those changes are made to say that someone needs to accept those changes. Okay. And then you've got the blue ones, which are your information. Okay, so the information message is created when online application is received from the online application web page. This message is sent to all users that are subscribed to this message type. So that would be to all users, but then you'd have one that would say there'd be a task to someone to say that you need to action this. Okay. 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 And then you've got certain event types. Again, when you use events, you can there's certain event types that some people can see, some people can't, depending on what the event type is. So in these cases, we've got it's all set to all, which again they can be added to at any time. Yeah, so as you can see, you've got those there, and they're all set to all. Now, what we suggest is if you're going to clean up the lookup tables at any stage, we suggest that rather than deleting entries within those lookup tables, just make them inactive, so you can actually make a entry inactive, and so that won't show in the drop down list. So if you want to minimize what they can choose from, okay, you're able to do that, okay? Because if you delete something and that entry or that selection's been allocated to a record, then that's going to be deleted off that record, okay? So you're better off just to deselect them. Okay. Okay. Dashboard tiles, what that refers to is that refers to SynWeb, so the web interface of Synergetic. So what dashboard tiles do you see there? Okay, so what dashboard tiles are going to show on SynWeb, and I'll show you what I mean by that. Have a stretch. Okay, now it's going to be on. I'll get into web. So I'm just going to open up the SynWeb from the IIS server. Excellent. Okay, so this is our web server here, SynWeb. I can log in as SA. So whatever when an account's set up, and be that either an SQL account or a Windows authentication account, that account or those account details will carry across to SynWeb. So they'll use the same. So if it's Cal Rossi /ANU, then your password, that'll work the same in both. Okay, permissions will be the same. The only difference there will be there's some modules that are available in SynWeb that aren't available in SynMain. Okay, so things like your excursions module, sports co-curricular, sports management, sorry, the form builder that's used for online forms. So they've done that intentionally because that's the way, you know, they want to go going forward. They want to move into the cloud and web-based or cloud-based functionality. And on the flip side, there's certain modules that are available at the moment in SynMain that aren't available in SynWeb. So things like your future students. So those ones where there's, you know, the meaty sort of modules where there's a bit of, you know, there's a fair bit of work involved in them, and a lot of the finance ones, which are done in SynMain. Okay. But besides that, things like students access. So if a teacher's got access to students, okay, the teachers would usually access SynWeb. They wouldn't access, or it sounds like they're going to access Schoolbox anyway, but with their attendances, they wouldn't do attendances through SynMain because it's a bit clunky through SynMain, whereas they would do it through SynWeb because it's more a web style, as you'd expect, a web style format. But the permissions are the same. So they still need to have that access set up in SynMain, and their permissions set up in SynMain, which will then flow through to SynWeb. So if I log in as I'm logging in as SA here.
So the web thing works well with things like iPads and stuff. I don't know if you teachers.
There's it does, yeah, it does. But then additional to that, there's a Syn mobile app too, which that's restricted as far as what's available at the moment because it's more, you know, your attendances, class lists, and things like that. But as far as
iPhones and Android.
yeah, Android and iPhones, yeah, yep, yep.
So is that something we like? So like the other day, I had a casual teacher come in and they wanted to do well. So if they've got this app on their Android or they should be able to. Or would we have to give
Would they?
data?
Yeah, they'd have to be set up. They'd have to have an account still. So depending on whether you'd set up, you know, accounts for relief teachers or.
Because they're going through the house, they're going through the mobile home button.
I guess I'm just trying to think of the easiest way to help those guys coming day up.
Well, I think that's where all the information is.
I'll try this again.
I said, I think that's the reality. I think that's the intention.
Yeah.
So basically, with your Windows authentication, they'll just tick that that'll be ticked from the start. So it'll have their username and password already in there. But for SQL, I've got that unticked at the moment. So our IT guys, it's not playing with me. Our IT guys should have a chat to you at some stage about getting certificates for the SynWeb and SynMain, if they haven't already.
They should be in there.
Well, they may already be in there. Yeah. Yep. Okay.
The Syn mobile app needs some sort of registration code, apparently. Essentially to configure it on the school server. So is there some sort of setup?
Yeah, they'll be set up. So our the systems team should be able to help you out with that. Yeah. So what they usually do is go through and see what modules have been purchased, and then they'll get in touch with you in regards to what needs to be set up for each of those. Yep. Yeah, so that's the thing. You may not have. Yeah.
We may be using the mobile hub. You know what I mean? The app for the hub, because that's where they want everyone to go through.
Try this again. I'll give this another go. Here we go. Okay, we eventually got in. So yeah, so this is what someone would see if they went into SynWeb. Now, because you're all teachers, my understanding is, from what Alex told me yesterday, the teachers won't be accessing SynWeb because that'll be another system they'll have to access. So they'll mark their roles through Schoolbox, which will then be feeding through or mapping through to Synergetic. But if it's someone from, so for instance, if you're with excursions, if you're creating an excursion, you would go through SynWeb. Okay. So you wouldn't need to, because the way this is set up at the moment, you'll see it's got a timetable, which they'll get their timetable in Schoolbox. Yep, going forward, because what will happen there is timetable will integrate directly with Synergetic and Schoolbox, so that'll be in there. Their classes, so all their classes the same. It'll be in Schoolbox. They won't be accessing Synergetic. Don't worry about the weather or school sports, things like that. They're just extra ones you can put in. So that there is to do with the dashboard tiles, but that may more than likely be irrelevant. Okay. So you got Action Centre, that'll always be there. Classes, parent-teacher interviews. So if they're doing what are they going to do their parent-teacher interviews through?
I think we'll try. We use it a lot at the moment.
Okay. So they'll probably do that as far as it's set up in Synergetic, and then in SynMain, and then the parents can they can go into the community portal and book their parent-teacher interviews through there. Is it PTO you're using at the moment? It's like
No, Solves.
What's it called?
Solves.
Oh, no, I know that one. No. Okay.
Solves. S-O-V-S.
Is that what the parents do after the interview?
That's what they call their children after the interview. But yeah, for those that are going to be using SynWeb, so you'll have things like under students, there's the excursion maintenance module, which we're going through this afternoon, aren't we? Pastoral care, so that's where they'll be able to add pastoral care. And so I suppose that's another question too. If it's going to pastoral care, where are they going to add that? Are they going to use Schoolbox pastoral care, or because if they're going to use Synergetic, they're going to have to go into SynWeb. That's the teachers.
Yeah. But they can go to SynWeb via the hub, can't they?
Yeah, you can have a link. Yeah. And if it's all set up, it can be set up with SAML authentication, so they only have to log in once.
I think that's probably the way.
And that'll take them through. Yeah. Yep.
Is that what you want?
Yeah.
There's still one spot.
That's what I mean. Yeah.
And their assessments and stuff like that too, like adding assessment results, and that's all done through SynWeb. So they'll have to,
so they'll just have whatever.
Yep.
The hub, and that's so as far as I'm concerned, they're just going into the hub, and it's not essentially a hub, but it's actually.
Yeah. So you see there's a perfect example of the restriction on some of the, for want of a better word, as for the restriction on finance modules that are available through SynWeb. You've got GL purchase orders and purchase order requisition. So all the other stuff, that's all done through SynMain.
So purchase orders, teachers can.
So teachers can actually, so they can lodge a purchase order through SynWeb, and purchase orders can be they can be approved through SynWeb too. Yeah, but so that's the sort of stuff that Sarah will take you through. Okay. All right, just see. Just bear with me a sec. Time we got? Okay, yep. Just checking that time. That's all fine. Yeah, so that's what that dashboard tiles, what that information there relates to. And the job position assignment, that was that one I said earlier, where you can have job positions assigned to the permissions, but that, you know, down the track there might be something you look at. That's, yeah, that's all done in there too. Okay. Now, as far as setting up a user, it is quite simple. It's just a matter of going. So you'll see these are the only users we've got set up yet so far. Okay, so what I would suggest is, and we can have an online session too between now and live. We can do it over. We used to use what was it called? It's called Zoom now. Zoom online. So basically, yeah. Before that, I can't even think of the name of it we used to use. Hasn't been all that long ago, but it's out of the mind. Yeah, so we could do a session before live, and then we'll get the users and the groups moved across. Okay. So with our users, once they're set up, so once you've got, and you could set up your users before you set up, even before you've got those AD groups that come across, because at that stage we're not.
When do we start setting up the AD?
It's just whenever you could start setting them up now. Yeah, just whenever you get time. Yeah.
The actual is there any module that needs to be set up in this one?
Well, basically, you can set up the AD at any time, and you can set up these users at any time. The only thing we need to make sure that we tell the on the Synergetic side that we tell the and I'll make sure that's done. I'll tell the converters that and the LIT guys that the whatever groups and users are set up in Synergetic pre-live in validation, so they need to be set up in validation, moved across to the live database. Yeah. But as far as the AD groups go, you can set them up, at any time as long, before live. So then but we can set these groups up and the users up, so they're all ready to go, and then we can just test them as soon as the ADs come across. We can then test those users. Okay.
So, you could just go through the maze group and look at those.
But there's going to be more because all teachers are going to have that.
Teachers.
No. There's not many that have got names. But I mean, it won't be public.
It's private.
Yeah,
So as far as creating a new user, it's just a matter of going new user there, and then we need to search for that user in Synergetic. So remember before I said they have to be a staff member. Yep. So do you mind if I use you, Alex, for this? That's all right. Yep. Okay. So basically that's all we have to do. Just put in a title. It'll want either a title or a gender, a surname, and as much as you can put in there to narrow the search down. Okay, I'll go new there. All right. So this is what we found yesterday, that Alex has actually got 2 accounts. Okay, 2 IDs have come across. That one doesn't even have a constituency, but this is the one we're going to use because that's her staff one. Okay, and then we can, with that one there, we can merge that into the other one going forward. But this is the one for the accounts. These are the ones that we want to set up. So we're going to say use this person. Okay, and then this will be your login name. So what's it? Is it Cal Rossi backslash? Okay, and it's new way, is it? Okay, cool. Right, so there's her group there. Yep, and then we would go, sorry, that's her user there, and then from there we'd say, okay, well, we're going to put you into the full rights group. Users in this group, that's only train pay at the moment. Okay, and then we're going to add Alex from there. Now, if there was, once you've set up all your users, if you've got a whole heap that have to go into the one group, you can basically just shift or control and set them all up, and then we'll put you in there. Okay. So now for you to have access to that, if you tried to log in now, it wouldn't actually allow you to log in because it wouldn't recognize you from the AD. Yeah, you wouldn't have an SQL. Sorry, you wouldn't have your AD account set up in the SQL server. Yep.
So where's that?
So that was where. So actually, I'll show you. So if I went in now, and I'll go back to. Did I close it down? Okay, so in our users here, so you see this is where our train pay and everything, that's what's allowing that to be used. So if I deleted train from here, we wouldn't be able to log in as train, okay? Now the only thing we need to set up, so if I go into train and look at the properties to see what's been set up here, okay, and this has been set up as a, this has been set up as an SQL with password, but we'd set it up as a Windows user without password or with password, whichever one you wanted. Right? There's no, okay, yep, own schemas, we don't have to worry about that. Memberships, we don't have to worry about any of that because that's all been set up in Synergetic itself too. Okay, so that's all cool, okay? Because we know the database, we're saying that this user is being set up in this production database in this case, yep? Okay. So what we could do is, for users, I'll go new user, okay? And I'll change this here to a Windows user. Okay. And in here, this is where I'll put Cal Rossi /new A.
Do you have to do that with every single user?
No, because you'll be setting up as a group, and those users will be in that group. You'll just set it up as a group, but then that group.
So how do you put that group in?
So how do you put the group in? So you would do for an actual group. Okay, we would say here, we're going to go username.
Oh, okay.
Yep, and we're going to go object types, and we're going to click on groups.
Yep.
Click on that, and then we could go.
Just type in maze.
Yep. It might want. Oh, wait on the Cal Rossi. We need to go back here and go entire work directory. Sorry, because it was just looking in that. Okay, and then we'll go maze. Check names. Yep. And then you've got your maze and maze user. Just maze. Okay. Yep. Okay. Yep, so if you're a member of that maze group, then you'll then got access to that. Now got access to that actual database. Yep. Okay, and we don't need to put, because it's a group there, we don't need to put in we've got the username, we don't have to put in a log, it shouldn't need a login name. Okay. You could test it now actually if you want to try to go into that, into your SIM verification or validation for the iPhone.
this one?
Yep. And then type in your username, type in Cal Rossi.
My main one?
Yeah, your main. Sorry, your Windows one. So just up the top here though, change your username to
that's right.
Cal Rossi though. You'll need,
Oh.
yeah, it'll want that to start off with, usually.
This one?
And I'll have to change the, before you hit enter, sorry, just bear with me a sec. I'll have to change the configuration file, so it's also Windows authentication, because at the moment it's set to SQL. Change it to B. So you might have to just cancel that and then go back into the icon again. So it brings up the Windows authentication. Yeah, so Windows authentication. Actually, before you click on that, type in your Cal Rossi again, Cal Rossi /, and then use Windows authentication, and then click on OK. Good. Click on OK. That'll come up the first time. Now you have access to Synergy verification. And because you're in there as a Sim super user, you've got all that. Yeah, so that's all. I just had to change that because that CFG authentication was set to SQL only, but now it's SQL and Windows, so we'll be able to get in with both now. Okay. Yeah, so that means they've all come across. That maze group has now all come across. So that's basically done.
I just have to set up all these.
Just got to set up the users in Synergetic.
We might create a new group.
In Maze?
No.
Or in?
We'll create a new one called Synergy.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Change mine to Synergy.
Okay, yep. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And whether you want to separate the groups.
Well, what we can do is all teachers going to have access to it.
Yeah.
We'll just put their new into there.
Yeah.
So if a new teacher gets added in, they get added into there. Just do it.
Yeah.
Can we back up and restore just the settings?
Just the settings themselves? I'm not too sure about that. I know you can back up. I know you can definitely back up the whole.
Yeah. It's doing a nightly backup.
Yeah.
I'm just a bit concerned that if we're doing a lot of setting changes, then we have to do a backup, restore for any reason, we're going to lose all the settings.
I'll find out. Yeah, I'll find out if you can just do a backup of the settings, because I know, you can back up everything, including the settings.
Yeah. The other thing is, while there's SQL backups being made, the VM is being backed up and replicated to off-site. So that's all right.
Yep.
But at the moment, we're doing hourly backups on Maze.
You're doing hourly, are you?
I noticed, can we do a differential on Synergy, or
have to find that out too. Yeah, I'll have to ask the
Because
IT
if
guys
we do
about
it
that.
now,
Yeah,
we could set it up as a differential,
yeah,
because it's going to get, I know it's over chickies now.
yeah, yeah.
And it's not going to be really small.
No, no, it's not. Yeah.
With the backup, the test server,
Yeah.
can you just do a restore of one of those backups onto the test server?
Yeah, yep.
Okay.
Yep, so you can do that whenever you want. You can do a restore onto the a backup or an update from the production to the test.
Okay.
Yep, at any
We
time.
don't have that facility on the school box, which is a pain in the ass.
Okay.
This,
Yep.
this my facility. So
Yeah. So yeah, you can definitely do that. Yep.
How far with the Synergetic and school box setup?
Mhm.
That's completely done by you and school box.
Yeah, that's right. Yep. So the integration itself's all done. Yeah, between the two of us. Yep.
Because at the moment we're using external databases in school box for students and teachers.
Yep.
Will we need to still do that? We really need to look see what comes out of it. So
Yeah. See what comes. Yeah, but you shouldn't if we're going to have those because you'll have all the information in Synergetic. So if the integrations work in between Schoolbox and Synergetic, which is, there's no reason why it shouldn't be.
It wasn't quite the way we wanted.
Okay.
So.
So did you have a different setup? Was there like a customized setup sort of thing?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we can check that out anyway. Yeah.
So is there any other maintenance we need to do?
No, not really. That's about it. Yeah. Yeah. To have it set up ready for day one, as long as they've got access to, and if there's
need to do on a daily basis.
Nah.
Because I asked
Ewan, yeah.
About server patching,
Mm-hmm.
and he said, yeah, as long as it's after hours.
Is that what he said?
Yeah. So we'll organise. Like,
Yeah.
This is
Okay.
SQL updates thing now.
Yeah, I'll have a chat to them because they're across that more. But even if I chat to the manager, Ewan's manager, just to make sure that that everything's.
Yeah, well, I was only concerned before we went live.
Yep.
Even if we just did it 7:30 one morning, just an update or something.
Yep.
Until we actually went live.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
No worries. Yeah, at this stage, I don't think there's much else to really show you. Just wanted to give you an idea of how we can set up, and it's good we've got at least one set up now. And we've those groups, so it's easy as that, as long as they're in the AD group, and that's where and we've now added that AD group to, and we can change that. Yep, but that AD group's been created in a SQL account, which has got access to that production server, and that's where the validations, what that's mapped to, as you can see. So Alex could then log in, and she's got those. Because she's in that Syn Super group. If we hadn't have put Alex in that group, she just wouldn't have been able to. It wouldn't have allowed her to log in.
So the hardest bit now is you're going to have to map each one of those users to the correct one.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the roles and the groups.
Yeah.
And that's what's going to have to be defined by the groups first.
So to get them there is an easy bit.
Thanks.
Hey guys. No doubt you have questions as we go along, but if you need, we can organise a session between now and live. So we've got everything set up before day one. But there's obviously going to be a bit of tweaking and stuff like that, and inevitably, we find go to open up a crystal report and there's a link broken or something like that. But they're little things that we can get fixed, pretty quick. So yeah, and on the timetabler side of things, that's probably worth mentioning because Alex and Mark are going to do timetabling training. Okay, so they'll be across that. But on the IT side of things, we'll send the instructions through, or the converter will send the instructions through. We basically need to get access to, for the direct integration to work, if we're going to go down that path, because we've got a fair bit of time to chat about that anyway. If that's the way we're going to go, we'll need access to the server where the timetabler files sit. Okay, not the text files, but the actual database files, so we can then drag them into, and it's just an automatic drag from then on. No, well that's, but that's something that we'll need to chat about going forward. And that sometimes doesn't happen until, live week itself, once we've got everything sorted out. But before then, we can use the text files if they just give us the text files to set it up, just to see how it's working. Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent.
That's good.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, I'll save this. I'll just check some emails and stuff. Yeah. Oh, thanks. Ta. And I'll make sure this recording's saved. Yeah, and if there's anything else I can think of between now and then, I'll have a chat to Newen and Scott's the manager of that team, just around the backups and stuff. Yeah, because they like to get involved and all that sort of stuff. They don't like us to get involved in that as trainers.
Yeah. Do you know how many copies and backups they're going to keep on the system?
I wouldn't. No. They'd be the best. To be honest, they'd be the best people to speak to about that. Yeah. So they'll be able to fill you in on that.
No worries.
Right, guys.
Okay.
Good on you. Pleased to meet you all. No worries, Alex.